Okay, today we'll take a look at using your critical intensities to inform your physiology. Again, understanding why you're doing what you're doing when you're doing it. So this is once your critical power or critical speed testing is completed, how can it be used to inform your training? So back to this slide, which we referred to a couple times in the last presentation, and which we'll refer to again a couple times here. Training intensity, let me just get myself out of the way here. Training intensity is on the bottom with our training and training zones, and physiological stability is on the y-axis. So x-axis training intensity, physiological stability on the y-axis. On the y-axis, this describes muscle fiber utilization across training zones as well as physiological stability relative to the training intensities. So across zone R and through most of zone 1, we are using mostly type 1 muscle fibers. In zone 1, we are at the top of zone 1, we're using a little bit of type 2A oxidative muscle fibers. Zone 2 is primarily defined by type 2A oxidative muscle fibers. Zone 3 with type 2A glycolytic muscle fibers, and then above zone 3 or above threshold by type 2X muscle fibers. I'll come back to this slide later. But for the most part, what we'll be doing today is considering how and where this critical power or critical speed lands relative to our power or pace at VO2 max. So how close this occurs to about this. All right, and I would like to give a quick thank you to Phil Skiba, who introduced me to this athletic architecture model, which is a great way to both understand and explain um, what it is that we do and how it works. So if we think of our fitness or our fitness abilities as being like a house, okay? And on the floor, we have our general robustness of our aerobic system and our training durability. Okay. As we if we expand the width of the floor, if we make the floor wider with more aerobic work and building training durability, the size of the house grows in a proportional kind of way. Um, Such that everything improves, and I'll touch upon that in a minute. The size of the person in the house. This represents our ability, or the athlete's ability, to utilize the fitness that they do have. The ceiling of the house represents the athlete's critical power or critical speed. The top of the or the bottom of the roof of the house would represent the athlete's power or pace at VO2 max, and the very peak of the house represents the athlete's peak power output. This defines so between our critical power and the the bottom of the roof defines our attic space. And the size of the attic space is really our primary area of concern for this, for what we're talking about today. At what percentage of the VO2 max does the critical intensity occur? And generally speaking, just to touch back, as we build the size of our aerobic robustness, our aerobic fitness, the size of the person grows, the athlete's ability to utilize that fitness grows, the athlete's critical power tends to grow, the athlete's power or pace at VO2 max tends to grow, and so does the athlete's peak power output. All right, so if we go back to some testing that we had from the last presentation, we take a look at what we refer to as the critical intensity to VO2 max ratio. Okay, so critical intensity being either critical power or critical speed to power or pace at VO2 max. So on the bike, we have a pretty standard test here of 3 minute, 6 minute, 12 minute with corresponding results 435 watts, 375 watts, 336 watts. On the run, we have a test that's about 90 seconds long, a short test, a test that's somewhere in the range of 2.5 to 3 minutes long, a medium test, and a test that's within the range of 10 to 15 minutes long, which is in this case 12:05. For this particular athlete, that was a 400 meter, an 800 meter, and a 3200 meter. What I recommend is that you choose the distance for the that will help the athlete. You choose the distance for the test on running that will land the athlete around these time frames, that 90 seconds, 2.5 to 3 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. And then those paces or those results are translated over to speeds: 5.19 meters per second, 4.85 meters per second, and 4.41 meters per second. In general, on the bike side of things, we can use the 3 minute test to represent the athlete's power at VO2 max. Okay. And on the run side of things, we can use the athlete's middle test to represent their pace or speed at VO2 max. Okay. So then and with these test results, we have corresponding critical power calculation through linear regression, as discussed in the previous presentation, and critical speed also as calculated through linear regression. So the critical power for this athlete is 302 watts. Critical speed is 4.29 meters per second. So to take the ratio, all we do is and take the ratio of their critical power or their critical intensity to their power or pace at VO2 max. We just take their critical power and divide it by their power at VO2 max. 302 divided by 435 equals 69.4%. And on the run side, 4.29 meters per second divided by 4.85 meters per second, which is 88.4%. So what does all that mean? So what does the critical intensity VO2 max ratio tell us about training physiology? Okay, so we essentially have three states, okay? And I'll go from left to right here. If the critical power or critical speed occurs at between 85 and 88% of power or pace at VO2 max, the athlete is typically in a balanced physiological state. If the critical power or critical speed occurs at less than 85% of power or pace at VO2 max, the athlete is typically in an anaerobic state. And if the critical power or critical speed occurs at something greater than 88% of power or pace at VO2 max, the athlete is typically in an aerobic state. So, how do we apply this? Okay, so essentially we have the the bottom of the roof of our house at 435 watts, okay, in our athletic architecture. We have the ceiling of the house at 302 watts, and that gives us a ratio of 69.4%, okay? And that 69.4 being less than 85% means our attic space is a little bit too big, okay? And so we are in an anaerobic state on the bike. On the run, we have the power at pace at VO2 max, the speed at VO2 max, at 4.85 meters per second. Our critical speed, sorry, at 4.29 seconds. So that creates an attic space. If we take that ratio, it's 88.4, which is greater than 88%. That means our attic space is too small. So, what are the training implications associated with that? I'll start here in the middle because that's the easiest one. So, here in an anaerobic state, we have an attic space that is too big. Okay. And so, what we want to do is we want to take our ceiling, our aerobic ceiling, our critical power, and push it up and pull it up towards the roof. Okay. We want to close this attic space by working on intensities that are just below and just above critical power. Okay. And I'll go over to the aerobic state quickly. And here we have a choice. Okay. We can, first off, we can try to raise because we have an attic space that's way too small. Okay. So we can either try to raise the roof of the house, okay, through specific VO2 max work. Okay. But the issue with that is it's highly intensive and highly stressful and can be a little, particular on the running side, can be a little dangerous. So you need to make sure that your athlete has the structural durability and structural integrity to be able to handle that. Um, or so that's one option. Okay, to increase that attic space by trying to raise the roof, or we can not attempt to increase that attic space and instead try to make the athlete's ability to maintain paces around or just below critical power for longer periods of time, to extend out the length of time that they can maintain that aerobic sailing. And that would be called increasing their time to exhaustion. This can often be the case for athletes who are highly experienced, whose aerobic system is highly developed, and there just may not be a lot of space, a lot that can be done with the roof of their house. If we go over here to the balance state, we also have a decision to make. Here we have an attic size that is just right, so we have to make a decision about relative to the race distance that the athlete is focused on. Is what is the athlete's limiter based upon relative to their race distance? Is it durability, in which case we would do a lot of base and durability work, or is it execution, in which case we would do a lot of race specific kind of work? And then back to our original slide. This aims to take the training implications and put it across our training zones and muscle fiber utilizations. So, a base durability block of training or phase of training uh, would be the athlete who has a balanced physiology with a durability limiter. We'd be working on intensity ranges that are, from zone R all the way up to low zone 2. As we go into the race specificity type of training, this is also an athlete who is in a balanced state physiologically, typically, but they have a race specific limiter that has more to do with the ability to execute. And so, depending upon the target distance, they would typically be somewhere mid to high zone 1, all the way up to actually probably all the way up to high zone 3, mid to high zone 3. So this specificity block should be extended a little deeper, um, depending upon the race distance. Uh, and then here we have a build threshold block, in which case build threshold type of training. For this is for the athlete who is more anaerobic, in a more anaerobic state. Their critical power is too low relative to their power VO2 max. And here we are doing work that is just below threshold. Okay. And we are doing work that is just above threshold. And then we have the athlete who is in a very aerobic state, and they have a couple of options. We can either focus on their VO2 max work, okay, to raise their roof, okay, or we can aim to do a lot of subcritical power or subthreshold work in order to extend out their time to exhaustion. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out, www.qt2systems.com. Email us at services@qt2systems.com, or you can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn.